Welcome, everybody, to TPI, the Total Podcast Idiot Show, where we pretend like we know anything related to Hardwood, the online college basketball game that you and I love. I am the complete idiot, Robert, over here, and that's my co-host, slightly less idiotic, Andrew. Andrew, how you feeling this weekend?
Yeah, I think that's debatable. Our results, I think we're about equal in our idiocy, especially with this game, right? I mean, it's been a bit of a rough go lately for both of us.
When you read a user's name as Jediah Lex, and it's obviously Jedi Alex, I think I take the cake in terms of idiocy. Puts me at the top.
I mean, we also mispronounced. I still probably gonna get this wrong, but Genesio.
Suni Genesio, I don't know.
Yeah, I still can't get that,
I
but
think it's Genesio.
we appreciate all the comments and the views on these videos, that we've been doing. We've been having a lot of fun, right, Rob?
More fun than I think we planned on having, which is
Yeah.
surprising. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, our last vid got a lot of views actually, so I was pretty happy about that.
I think every video we've done is at least gotten to triple digits now at this point.
Nice. All
Yeah,
right, all right.
yeah. So that's really encouraging. It means a lot of people are watching. And I don't care if you guys are watching two or three times over. Whatever gets us views, whatever people are happy with, fine by us.
Right, yeah. I think I've only watched them a couple of times, so it's not all me.
You love listening to yourself talk,
Oh gosh.
huh?
Don't get me started. I hate that.
Uh, so,
All
uh, so,
right.
so what's new here in the Hardwood universe this week, Andrew? Kick us off.
Yeah, the I think the big thing, well, of course, we're about halfway through the conference season. I think we're exactly halfway when we're recording this actually. And, that's a pretty significant mark, I'd say, over halfway through the overall season, of course. And so teams are basically what they're going to be. I mean, teams can make runs, teams can fall off, of course, there's injuries. But for the most part, teams are what they are, right? And with that, the tournament tab has appeared, and that's going to be some pretty interesting forecasting, I guess, by the game, which we don't understand the engine of how it happens. So yeah, if you're watching this video, go check out that tab because it's really cool to just see where your team is. Hopefully it is there, right? I mean, we're talking about like a lot of good teams, but fact of the matter is, not every team makes the tournament. All right. Um, so yeah, check that out, see where your team is, and then watch, every day how it moves up or down, and then try to
Oh,
figure out why.
it's agonizing, absolutely agonizing checking the tournament tab and seeing on the bubble or like you drop a spot even after a win or like didn't you have a big win last season and you dropped like two spots?
Yeah, yeah. I remember with Rochelle, we were vying for a number one seed, right? And it just seemed like we were constantly at the number two, but then sometimes at like number three or even four when we lost to like New Jersey City or whatever, right? And that was just so frustrating.
Yeah, it's the tournament tab is simultaneously one of the greatest things about the game and one of the most frustrating for sure.
Yeah, but it honestly doesn't matter at this point in the season. It's nice to see, you can kind of gauge how your team is doing or where they stack up to the rest of your level. But, at the end, the seedings are going to be the seedings at the end of the game or at the end of the season, and that is what it is.
Yeah.
So right now, it doesn't have any influence. It shouldn't, at least, on the seeding later on. It's not like just because you're a number one seed now doesn't mean you're going to be a number one seed at the end. I mean, you could drop to six or whatever.
It can change so fast. Literally, like a two-game losing streak can drop you from like a three seed to out. It can
Yeah,
go fast. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
but they're bad enough losses.
yeah.
That sounds pretty rough.
Yeah. I mean, it happens, but I think it's a pretty good when the tournament tab populates like this halfway through the conference. It's usually a really good reflection of how good your conference might be, right? Like the overall strength of that conference. So we're gonna highlight some teams later and talk about their current tournament standing in terms of seeding and then where they're sitting in their conference and stuff. But like, I mean, just using one of my teams as an example, Santa Clara is currently sitting at 8th in the conference, and they're on the second line of on the bubble, right? So then that tells you that conference is really strong, and we've highlighted how strong it is previously. Santa Clara has a really good RPI, but I mean, Santa Clara's 8-7 in conference, so it's not like we're dominating competition or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we're still sitting at the 2 seed, or the second line of on the bubble. So the conference strength in that case is giving us some respect.
Yeah. And, we'll probably get into it more as the weeks go on. But would you say the tournament projections are accurate?
So this is something that we actually thought about tracking last season, right? And then we didn't do it
Yeah.
fast enough. Yeah. But
Literally.
yeah, we literally like the night before we're like, we should really like track this and then see what seed everybody ends up as. And because right now it's a projection, right? But like we don't know, and maybe somebody can comment and tell us if they know or not, if the projection results in the actual tourney seedings the day after. Like anecdotally thinking about our teams, I do remember our seedings being very similar to what they were in terms of the projection.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's like 1-to-1. I don't remember if like, oh, I'm a 4 seed going on the last day. I'm for sure a 4 seed going into the tournament. I don't
Right.
remember.
Yeah, I remember I was walking back from somewhere that morning and I messaged you, did you take a picture? And you're
Yeah,
like, oh no, I missed it. And I was like, crap, I did
yeah.
too.
The weird thing about those last few days before the tourney generates is like some teams are still playing and some teams aren't, right? Because of conference tournaments. And
Mm-hmm.
so if like your team is really good but gets knocked out really early in the conference tournament and other teams have a chance to make up ground, that can drop you, obviously, really quickly. Or you can even gain space. You can gain a couple slots. And then you're always going to have the teams that come out of nowhere and win their conference tournament when they were never expected to, and then those are going to be some automatic spots. So
For
there's
sure.
always that like that wiggle room going into the tourney.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And just really quickly, what goes into the seeding and the tournament rankings?
Yeah, so some of the things that we think, right, are I would say, and tell me if you agree with this, probably the two most important factors going into tournament seeding are RPI and your conference positioning. And of course, like how strong your conference is, how strong your strength of schedule goes into your RPI, right? But RPI and conference positioning. So I remember one time like being one of my early Oswego seasons, I was like 40th in RPI, but we were sitting at like fifth in the conference and we didn't
Mm-hmm.
end up making the tournament, right? Telling you obviously that like the conference positioning is a super important tournament there. Yeah, so I mean, would you agree that you think RPI and conference positioning are two pretty important factors in that?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think RPI, it's pretty evident that it has a strong effect on the seedings and the projections, especially right now, because you look at the top teams in each division, they're usually, um, in the top 2 or 3 seeds. Not overall, I mean, like they have at least a number 3 seed in the projections. And that seems to line up. I think I saw in Division 3 at least, the top like 6 teams are all number 1 seeds, and then the rest of the top 8 are number 2 seeds.
Oh, okay.
So, or 4 of the top 6 are 1 seeds, and then the others in the top 8 are also 2 seeds. So,
Yeah.
it seems to line up mostly. But then, we've noticed some interesting situations, more so further down in RPI, where conference standing seems to have an effect, as you mentioned with Oswego. And I remember this happened with Santa Clara last year with you, for much of the year, where you were like third or fourth in the conference, and it wasn't like that strong of a conference. So, even though your RPI was really good, you were like on the bubble for a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then, you luckily ended up making it with a big push in the second half.
Yeah.
But I know yeah, there was a lot of that concern with your teams last season. So I think, yeah, conference standing seems to have a pretty big effect too, as well.
Yeah. And I mean, again, anecdotally, with my Kingsville team, that conference is terrible, right? The conference that Texas A&M Kingsville is in,
Mm-hmm.
and as a result, Kingsville RPI is not that great. But like the number 1 seed in my conference, and like up until yesterday, I believe they were sitting on out. So now they've moved into like in the tourney field, but like towards the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
But they were out, even though I was like the number one seed in that conference. So, I mean, conference, obviously, like we said, conference strength is going to play into RPI and stuff. But even though like you're leading your conference, I mean, obviously, if you win your conference tourney, then you're going to get an automatic bid. But like even though you're leading your conference the whole season, if the conference is just whack like Kingsville's is, then it's not going to matter really.
Yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind, especially in D3, because I think there are some conferences where the conference leader is like not projected to make not necessarily projected. I mean, the RPI isn't that strong,
Yeah.
like outside the top 70, and someone has to make it into the tournament. So that's going to push out someone else who might be ranked highly, but just there's not enough space for them.
And I think obviously this applies a little bit more heavily with D3 because there's so many teams and a lot of conferences in D3, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to have all those weird like variations and things like that, and like daily perturbations up and down. So um,
Yeah, right, exactly. You don't see it as much in D1 or even D2, but we got to show D3 some love too.
we have to. We started D3. We are a D3 podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
We are a D3.
We should
Yeah.
we
All
should
right.
rename it to Total D3 Podcast.
All right. So let's get into some talk about the each division, right? And we always start with D1, so we'll continue on there. I think eventually we'll try mixing it up. Don't worry, guys. All right. So me personally, I wanted to focus on some teams that seem to be outperforming their TPIs when we look at the RPI and conference standings. It was brought up in the Discord and the forums, and I thought it was a really good idea, especially for where we are in the season. And I think the two teams that really stand out in D1 are Butler, that team, the bot team in Legends. Um, they're still bot, but they're really good. They're number 2 in RPI. But I'm not going to highlight them. I'm not going to talk about them too much because we just don't talk about bots too much. But clearly, they're still very good. And then Ursinus.
They're currently projected a 1 seed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that they have the infrastructure to be very good, of course, still.
Yeah.
But something I don't know. I can't trust a low TPI team still. It's just
At,
hard for me.
at that level, yeah, at that level, for sure.
Yeah. And then the other team is another Legends team, Ursinus. We talked about them last week, and they're number 12 in RPI. They're the only other team in the top 12, and even the top 15 with a TPI under 150. Um, well, there's one more, but we'll talk about them later.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we talked about Ursinus last week. Go back to last week's episode if you want to hear more about them in depth. But instead, I'm going to move on to the number 26 team in RPI. This is Cal State Dominguez Hills. This is Holocron's team. I know a few professors at Dominguez Hills, actually. And friends, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're number 26 in RPI, but they're a 9 seed, right? So just do the math there. 9 times 4, that's 36. So they're kind of overshooting their seed with RPI. And again, with their TPI only being 142.7, that's pretty low for a D1 team, especially one performing this well and ranked this high. Clearly they're performing well. So we want to figure out why, right? And my hypothesis coming into this was like, oh, these teams are just really big, right? Because we've kind of seen like size matters. But with Dominguez Hills, I mean, yeah, they're very big. Alberg and Hill are really good. Here, I'm gonna share my screen real quick.
How funny. The starting power forward is Alberg and the backup power forward is Algren.
Yeah, I remember Louis Algren. He was a really good prospect that I kind of was interested in. All right, so here we got Patrick Hallberg and Ryan Hill. These are the starting big men for Dominguez Hills. And then, they're a little further, not that far down on the rankings here for this team, SI wise. But when you scout this team, your attention is going to be immediately drawn to Anderson Rogers, right? 180 SI. He's a shooting guard. He's 6'6", so he's big, but he's pretty fast. And then you see these shooting numbers, and they're just ridiculous. 14, 19, 15, 13. He can drive 15, the 15 rating here. That's pretty tough. He's 18 strength, so he'll just drive and push you around and then be able to score at the bucket. But then he can also shoot.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is a good example of, his perimeter defense rating is 11, which I mean is decent, but he's not a lockdown defender by any means, right? But he's currently giving up 39.1% opponent field goal percentage from the field. And like we talked about previously, 6'6" at the shooting guard position, he's going to be oversized for a lot of people. An 18 straight, 15 speed, so he can body guys up. He's gonna keep up with, even at his height, he's gonna keep up with some of the fastest point guard or shooting guards, I should say. Um,
Yeah.
so some of those intangibles that you like to highlight that might be, contributing to his success.
Yeah. And so, they play really fast though, and that's helped by their depth. I believe they have 10 guys who play a decent amount of minutes, at least 9 minutes a game. But, you know, given that this is a low TPI team, the SIs aren't going to look that great. And you see this gap between their fourth and fifth best player. And then it just obviously continues to drop, with the way I sorted this roster. And so, you get another big drop of 120 to 109 here. And I believe Jenkins is the end of like who plays for this team.
Stokes.
So,
okay, Stokes. Yeah.
In terms of this picture, I mean, sorry.
Yeah,
That's
gotcha.
my fault. So the question for me is, I'm going to be nitpicking kind of really, Colin Cron is doing a great job here. I don't want to discount that, but so I'm going to be nitpicking kind of. But the depth, they're deep, but is it quality depth is my question. They're reaching pretty far down, there's 108, there's 109, and yet they're young, freshmen, redshirt freshmen. But it's tough when you're getting, 20 minutes a game from sub 110 SI guys, and these guys, Nixon, Algren, and Bernard, they're obviously quite a bit better, but again, you probably want someone more in the 130s as a backup, like a few guys more in the 130s as backups. So, they're young, right? All redshirt freshmen or true freshmen coming off the bench. So it's not like this team's future is bad, but it's just a little bit of a question about the depth.
And I think your points make a lot of sense, especially for a team that's going to play really fast, right? So lots of possessions. You're going to try and spread the minutes out because you're worrying about fatigue. So, if you're going to play guys 10, 11, 12, 13 minutes as backups, that's a significant chunk of game time, right? That's almost, that's a quarter or more of the total minutes per game. And, sometimes it's really easy, or it's interesting to look at plus minus breakdowns for your starters versus your bench and sort of see, how that staggers and whether or not, hey, this is like becoming a weakness of mine, or, maybe they're overperforming their SIs and it's actually like a strength. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I haven't looked at all these teams like on that spectrum yet. I mean, I look at who's taking the shots and I look more at the team wide statistics on like how they play. And, Dominguez Hills, they play really fast. So yeah, but I don't know if any player is really outperforming or underperforming, right? But you can see, I guess, I'm taking a look at it now. You can see a few of the bench guys are negatives or really close to neutral, but then the starters are like big pluses, and that makes sense, just given the way the roster looked, right? And then going to in conference, similar story.
Yeah, pretty much the same trend there.
Yeah. So, and then a few more things I wanted to hit on this team is Ed Reed is the power forward, or the small forward, sorry. instead of Rodgers, right? Size wise, it would make more sense for Rodgers to be at small forward, in my opinion. But Holocron is opting for Reed. So I thought that was interesting.
So do you think,
Mm-hmm.
just thinking out loud, do you think that's a reflection of the fact that Rodgers is such a good scorer that he's just going to prioritize scoring at the shooting guard position regardless?
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, I feel like you can overcome that by just putting Rodgers at like plus or plus plus, and he plays a position that he's more physically suited for, and maybe defensively too.
So maybe though, I'm just trying to think of his thinking, his line of thinking. Maybe he's like, hey, Rodgers is a really good scorer. He's 6'6" and fast, so he's going to get all of his shots off, presumably without a ton of issue, because he's not going to be matched up against a lot of guys that are 6'6", right? Usually shooting guards are somewhere around 6'2". So he's going to have a pretty good advantage in terms of getting his shots off, and he's already such a great scorer. Maybe he's just trying to think about maximizing his best talent kind of thing. You're muted.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense. Um, I I think more so that's the case with like putting your best player at point guard because then you know they have the ball versus like shooting guard. To me, at least, I kind of equate with small forward. I just consider shooting guard and small forward as wing,
Yeah.
and sometimes even power forward. So, like that, I think that makes more sense by putting your best player, that talented scorer, at point guard. But I'm not so sure about as shooting guard. It's just nitpicking. Clearly, it's working for Dominguez Hills. Um, and one other thing that I think they might want to try out come playoff time, or when it's really needed, is upping the minutes of the starters because they don't play very many minutes, right? These are
Yeah.
under 30 minutes a game for the starters, and I don't think they have like poor staminas, really. I think they could handle more than 30 minutes, and then you're putting your better players in the game more, right?
Right.
So I think that might be a strategy they might want to do when it comes time where they really need to win. But right now, yeah, like get the younger guys to play more, develop more, and so that's a good strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to keep an eye on them, see how they finish off the season.
Yeah, well, Holocron's pretty active in the Discord. I think we'll be updated a lot on their whereabouts for sure. But we enjoy, he's a great president, it seems like, for the team, and he's taken this team really far. So it's been exciting to watch them so far.
I think I think we both really appreciate the most active Discord users and their daily updates and daily commentary for sure.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
who do we got next?
So up next, let's talk about North Greenville. Why don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so North Greenville, L. Martin's team. And first, you know, I always want to highlight a really good head coach's name. And I mean, Billy Bob Christensen, like for a school that's located in Tigerville, South Carolina, to have a head coach named Billy Bob Christensen. I mean, that's just getting it done for me. That's just getting it done. Sorry.
Tiger. I like the city name, the location, Tigerville. That's pretty hilarious.
Right, you think Tigerville and you're like, oh, okay, they must be either the Tigers but then you have Clemson that are the Tigers. So it's
Right.
like, yeah, I want to go to Tigerville because I'm like curious the population, like
Yeah.
how big of a town that is.
All right.
But maybe L. Martins is an alumni and he can tell us all about North Greenville sometime in Tigerville, South Carolina. But yeah, so getting out to talking about their team a little bit. So right now they're number 42 in RPI. They're an 8 seed on the tourney line, but I think most importantly, the thing to highlight with them, and this is sort of a theme, right? Like a team that we just talked about too. They have 9 guys that play 10 plus minutes. Or is one, two, three, four. They have 11 guys that play 10 plus minutes.
Well, is that including the red shirts?
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. So nine, not including the red shirts. Yeah, that's a fairly good point. Yeah, yeah. So Mims is at 31 minutes a game with 2 games, right? Obviously, yeah, yeah. Good point. Yeah.
Hmm.
So then in their regular rotation they have 9 guys that are playing 10 plus minutes. And you can see they got 7 guys scoring in double digits, right? So anytime you can have that distribution of scoring, your team's probably pretty deep. But in particular, some of the better players that they have, I'm gonna assume it's Louis Petrie. Their point guard there, he's like 6'6", 210, which is like a fairly good size for a point guard. Now, obviously, he's got, the shooting guard position is his natural position. He's being played at point guard though, and I mean, he's got an 18 in ball handling, a 15 in driving, and a 12 in passing. A little bit low IQ for a point guard, right? Currently sitting at like 9 for basketball IQ, and a little bit slow as well, like sitting at an 8 for speed. But like really surprisingly, a 16 in interior defense. That's random, and like a 15 on perimeter defense, and some good shooting stats. Right, he's got like a 16 for outside shot and a 12 for shooting range. So, like good size, but also like a legit point guard, um,
Yeah.
averaging like 5.6 assists per game this year. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Um, but also like just across the board, they're a team that's going to really prioritize size, right? So Petrie at 6'6", point guard. Their shooting guard, who's injured right now, sits at 6'4", right? Brandon Alford. And then Ordonez, their small forward, right? Arturo Ordonez sits at 6'8", right? So that's a really, yeah, so 6'8", 260 with a 6'10" wingspan. You're going to be hard pressed to find guys that can manage to play the small forward position with those kind of physical stats, right?
Hmm.
And without struggling. So like 11 speed on Ordonez, 14 perimeter defense. He's only giving up 39% from the field on opponent field goal percentage. So again, that size is coming into play. Um, and then yeah, at power forward and center they got Sweeney, who's 6'9.5". He plays a lot of minutes. On their historical depth chart, it shows he's starting. Um, and Beatty, I'm gonna assume it's Beatty. Beatty.
Yeah. I've heard it both ways.
Yeah. I'm gonna assume it's Beatty, but 6'11", like a really really good center. 16 rebounding, 14 interior defense.
Which,
So
damn.
yeah, like I would kill to have that, right?
Yeah.
So he's one of those guys that's got the SI in the right places, right? The skill index at the categories that you want for his position. Like
Hmm.
for example, he's a 4 in passing. You don't care. He's playing center. But interestingly though, his finishing rating is only 4. So when we start to think about like as a center and you have inside shot versus finishing, you know, I mean I don't know how much one's going to play like factor into the overall performance versus another for a big guy. Obviously, you think it'd be shooting or it'd be inside shot more than anything, but I imagine finishing has to play into that a little bit. And one of the more puzzling things, something that we can probably just analyze for a little bit. Um, their backup currently is Donovan Burrows, who's 6'9", 230, with an 8 rating of speed, and a seven rating on perimeter defense. And the thing is he currently sits as the backup small forward, right? And his
Hmm.
natural position is center, and he sits at a backup small forward. And so we highlight guys that can play out of position because they have the physical intangibles to make up for that kind of thing. It doesn't really seem like Burrows kind of, um, you know, has those physical intangibles to play that position. It seems like he might be oversized for the small forward.
Right. Yeah. I don't think he's quite fast enough.
Yeah.
And his perimeter defense is lower than his interior defense. So yeah, I would think he would be a better fit as a big man, personally.
Yeah. So, maybe that's a concern that they have in terms of, long-term depth. And are they going to have a small forward, a starting small forward going into, obviously maybe it'll be newbie or something, but, just in terms of depth of having like a two deep and playing guys so many minutes, it'll be
Hmm.
interesting to see. Maybe those are minutes that he struggles and they lose a couple points here or there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I going back to Ordonez actually, because you brought up something like you'll be hard pressed to find a small forward with these physical measurements. like I think a lot of teams would be really tempted to play him as a big man. Um, so it's interesting that North Greenville has the luxury to play him at, it looks like somewhere where he's better fitted, a better fit for to play small forward as opposed to being pigeonholed in a big man spot just because of his size. Yeah, he's a really great rebounder, so it's not like he would. Well, he's a decent rebounder, not really great.
Yeah.
Um, but his interior defense being just a nine. If he were center, especially in LL3, he would kind of struggle. I think.
Yeah. I think that's fair to say.
So it's interesting, yeah, that North Greenville has the luxury to play him at small forward. I think that's really good.
Yeah, and just
Management. Yeah.
real quick, I just want to
Mhm.
highlight the fact that if we look at their top 8 guys in SI, I mean, I just roughly counted it. Those are all like 11 and 12 pot, 3 and 2 stars, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
right.
we always have this conversation in recruiting where it's like, legends and like LL2, LL3, like, you need to be going after these really high SI senior year guys that are 12 pot, 4 stars, 5 stars and stuff. But here's an example of a team that's starting an 11 pot 2 star at center, right? Beatty, and he's
Mm-hmm.
more than holding his own. This is a development squad. This is, you take a class, they develop really well, and then their impact all at the same time.
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, just wanted to highlight that. Okay, so I think that'll about wrap it up for North Greenville. You alluded to previously talking about another team earlier that is outperforming their TPI. And do you want to go ahead and talk about them?
Yeah. So we're gonna be looking at the Bradley Braves, and so they sit at number 14, I believe, in RPI.
Yeah, 14.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, just pulling them up here. It's hard to do this on the fly so much.
Yeah.
So I'll just talk about them really quick, but this is Boone 67's team. I didn't want to do all of El Martin's numbers in his name. It's a lot. Um, but yeah, so this is the Bradley Braves. They're number 14 in RPI, but they're a 6 seed. So again, it seems like their RPI is outperforming their TPI, and their seed, because you can see, let's see, I'm going to go to the rankings and look at TPI, just 146.3 in TPI when, most of these teams are above 150 when we look at the top 50 or so. Or I guess it's more like the top 25 or so. But, Bradley's doing really well. They're 22-3. They're LL4. And we mentioned them briefly last week as like one of these hot teams in LL4, but they're keeping it going, which is really great to see. Um, so why are they so good with such a low TPI? And I'd say the answer is just the top end talent, right? We see you started off with Farrell and Cleary, 180 and 175. 5 star and a 4 star, 13 pots, senior and redshirt senior. And then they also have a 5 star redshirt freshman though in France. And that's going to form much of the perimeter for this team. And I'm not exactly sure where McCarty plays. I think he's probably coming off the. No, he's starting. See, I don't know these
Starting
teams that
shooting
well.
guard, yeah.
Then where does France play? I
France is the
didn't look
backup
up.
shooting guard.
Oh, okay. I should
Yeah,
have done this research before.
all good.
So I can cut this out if need be, or
Yeah.
keep it in.
I think
Um,
keep it in. Let's keep it raw.
all right. So yeah, France. I mean, it makes sense to bring your redshirt freshman off the bench behind a junior. I feel like there's hidden effects of like having more experience versus less experience, and less experienced players playing worse than their SI or their ratings or whatever, versus older, more experienced players playing a little bit better or up to those ratings. So, that makes sense. Get France some experience and still develop, but don't throw them into the fire right away. And then, their bigs are Hill and No, and they're pretty solid, I'd say. Um, but clearly they're not very deep, right? It kind of ends there. Young is somewhere in there getting some minutes. Um, I imagine D'Angelo Franklin, though, is the third big, right?
Backup center, backup power forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that's okay. He's a freshman. He'll be good, but as again as a sub 110 SI guy in D1, that's not ideal at least.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they're just not that deep. Their staminas are not superb, but they're pretty fast. So, like, they can keep up if you try to turn up the pace a lot. Um, but, they're just that I'd say they're a really top heavy team, and yeah, it looks like they can shoot the ball really well looking at their OS and their range. No looks like a really good scorer inside, but I don't know. To me, not having the depth is not gonna portend well later on when you face these really deep teams. Because it just means you have less options to attack a team or to throw at a star player or one of the other team's best players. You know, because there's so many ways you can attack another team's defense or another team's offense, right? With different size, different sizes of players and lengths and speeds and stuff. So I don't
So
know. Bradley just doesn't have those options, I guess.
do we think that this is an example of a get a class, compete until they're seniors, juniors, or whatever, and then tank? Do you think that's why they don't have a lot of scholarship players? There's not a lot of depth there because it's going to be, a bunch of guys go and a bunch of really good guys come in, that kind of thing.
I hadn't thought about it because the president does seem pretty active. Um, he does have a two-star center coming in, so it's not like he's only going after 5 stars. And yeah, he's going after some highly rated guys still. But I don't think that's necessarily like a tank job, really.
Yeah.
He has another 3-star that he's on to. Um, so it just looks like they're prioritizing, these highly rated guys and then just taking some other talent along the way. Um, I'm not sure what they did in previous years in recruiting. I get, 688 is not great, but it doesn't seem like they got Franklin, right? That's a 3-star.
Yeah.
And maybe a JUCO guy. I don't actually know.
I think it's just weird for me anytime you see like a team, they're in what, LL4, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anytime you see a D1 team that has 9 scholarships available in any season, right, coming into any recruiting season, that's
Yeah.
just my first thought is, okay, well, they're trying to keep a lot of scholarships available to entice, to attract, some of those higher rated guys. But it doesn't seem like this is a traditional tank job in the sense that, start over completely or anything like that.
I
Um,
think it's just a cycle, Yeah, like
right.
yeah, they have a lot of scholarships open, so they know that that is an advantage when it comes to recruiting those highly rated guys. But looking at their history, it's not like they're on this like downward spiral and just taking advantage of being in D1, of having a lot of scholarships to simply only go after 4 and 5 stars.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a tank job. Yeah.
So actually, real quick, don't do you mind going back to the history?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Just looking at their past performances and lack of tourney appearances, like finished 32 and 11 and 22 and 8 for second in their conference in 2014
Mm-hmm.
and didn't make a tourney appearance.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really surprising.
Yeah, I mean that's something that just caught my eye real quick.
Yeah, that's a good catch. I'm not sure why. It must have been a weak non-con schedule. I mean, the RPI is not like bad.
Yeah, I mean certainly not terrible at all.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
that
interesting. I don't
that
know.
looks like an outlier season, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean,
Damn, that's
anytime,
the Phoenix Suns of
yeah,
2014.
anytime I finish second in conference, I'm assuming I'm getting a tourney bid, right? Like,
At least, definitely in D1, even just LL4, maybe not so much in like LL6. I think that's quite possible for it to not happen, but like, yeah, in LL4, I think you should.
yeah, yeah,
Good
interesting.
catch.
Yeah, just
Huh.
something that caught my eye.
You look up here at 2007 too. They finished first in the conference, and yeah, it wasn't as good of an overall record and a really weak RPI. It's still like similar thing with being in first in conference and not making the tourney at all.
Yeah,
A really bad RPI though, so
yeah,
that makes a little more sense at least.
yeah, and that was
Well,
what
look,
LL6 or whatever.
oh, that was LL6. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, that makes sense. Look, the trophies get bigger the more you when you are in different
I
conferences.
wouldn't
I
I
didn't
wouldn't
know
know that.
that.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
I
I
gotta
know.
win a conference first.
Have you not? I thought you
I
won one.
I won with Oswego, but that was one, obviously. So
That's true. Yeah, we gotta win multiple. I've only won one too.
yeah,
So,
we'll get there.
oh no, I've won two. Whatever. All right. Who do we got next?
Next, we are going to quickly take a look at Air Force. We don't want to spend too much time in D1. We still have D2 and D3 to get to. So we'll talk about Air Force. Schmiles is the owner, which Schmiles, kind of a great name. Obviously, I'm assuming his name's Miles. But Air Force, yeah. So Schmiles has been around since like what, July 2018. So a longtime president. Pretty experienced, obviously. So if you go to their conference real quick. So interestingly, they are 12-3 in conference, leading this conference, but 17-8 overall, right? So they must
Mhm.
have had a pretty tough non-con. And if you look at the home away splits for this team, especially 12-2 at home, but 5-6 on the road. Um, so that's pretty interesting. But like we said, the strength of schedule is 583, which is going to play into a really strong RPI of 0.61 there. But you have to wonder how well Air Force is going to hold off the rest of the conference. It'll be interesting to see. Like I said, that away record might be factored into like a really strong non-con. But I mean, Chaminade number 2 there, sitting at 12-0 away, and Portland has 10 home games and 15 away games, and they're 12-3. So this is going to be a tough conference for Air Force. But I mean, right now, sitting atop the conference, strong RPI, that's always good. Yeah, those are things that you want. Um, if you go to the tourney line, they're actually sitting as a 10 seed right now, which is quite interesting, right? We're talking about the RPI versus the conference standing and how that plays into like your tourney projection and stuff. And obviously, this isn't one of the better conferences in D1, and the D1 tournament is going to be taken up by legends in LL2 and stuff. But they're like what, a loss or two away from being on the bubble, and maybe they're still sitting at 1 or 2 in conference and they're on the bubble instead of automatically in. So just one of those things to keep in mind, when we talk about measuring a team's conference and RPI performance and sort of like that. Something else I wanted to highlight about Air Force is we were talking a little bit about teams that might be outperforming their TPI. And so this is a team that has a 146 TPI. That's certainly not bad, but for D1, that's certainly not gonna, that's not dominant or anything like that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so just one of those things to think of. But I mean, you look at the roster and there's still talent there, right? So small forward Elliott's a 171 SI. He's obviously really good, especially when you look at the shooting skills, right? 16 outside shot, 15 range. He can fill it up, and it makes sense if you look at the stats. He's currently scoring 18.7 points a game. Um, yeah,
Wait,
18.7
seven.
points a game. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, oops, sorry, yeah, 17 points a game. Yeah, I meant to highlight the fact that he's got a really good field goal percentage, 50% field goal percentage. Yeah, so he's
Mhm.
struggling from three a little bit, but he's shooting 50% from the field, scoring 17 points a game, grabbing 9.4 boards. Those are all really good, right? Those are good stats. But particularly when he's grabbing that many boards, Um, when he's grabbing that many boards and he's starting where exactly? I forget where he's starting.
It looks like he
Minutes are coming.
starts at small forward and then moves to power forward.
Yeah. So exactly, yeah. So he starts a small forward, moves to power forward. So he's kind of got some position of flexibility there. But still, I mean, with the amount of like rebounding numbers you see here, somebody sitting at 12.6, a player sitting at 9.9, and you have a third guy sitting at 9.4. I think that's pretty unique.
Yeah.
Most teams are going to have one guy that's above 9 or maybe two, but they have three guys averaging above 9 rebounds a game. So that's pretty unique. But yeah, so like we said, we're just going to quickly cover Air Force, and then keep an eye on them. Like I said, the home and away splits are quite interesting. So we'll have to see, how that plays out looking into the future. All right, so I think we spent plenty of time there on D1. Do you want to move to D2 and highlight some of the teams that might be doing well there?
Yeah. So there's plenty of teams we've already talked about. Northern Kentucky, San Francisco, Michigan Tech, Marist, and then Bowling Green is really interesting though. They're still undefeated at 25-0, but they're only a 3 seed projected in the tournament. What do you think about that?
I mean, so again, here we are talking about the RPI conference standing kind of thing, right? And how much it plays into it. Bowling Green, like we said, 25-0, which means obviously they're leading their conference and they're a 3 seed. And it's not like they have a bad RPI. The RPI is 582. But if you look at the teams above them, just quickly looking at like MSU Moorhead, for example, his RPI is what, 626. So that's like a quite sizable gap between the two there. And then Biola is at 604, so that's still like a decent gap. I don't know. If I was like 25-0 and still undefeated, I would be pretty upset that I wasn't a 1 seed personally.
Yeah, right. I would be too. Like, I'd definitely be wondering what's going on in the game.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I if he goes 40-0 and doesn't end up as a 1 seed, something's weird for sure. Like that would be troubling, in my opinion at least.
Yeah. All
Uh,
right. So let's go on to some other teams though.
yeah,
And like I said, I wanted to highlight teams that were, seemingly outperforming the TPI. And so I think the top example in D2 is Westminster College, right? They are ranked 11th in RPI
yep,
and projected as a 4 seed. So that kind of lines up. Let me go to D2 here. But you'll see their DPI is only 125.6.
yeah,
That is very low, especially for a team in the top 50, let alone the top 15 or almost top 10, right? Second lowest TPI in the top 50 of D2. So something's going on. And again, I initially thought it was, just size, but this team has solid size. Miles Woodard is nice and big and can score inside. Fabian Estrella is pretty solid too inside. That's their center and power forward. But other than that, they're not like incredible. Chapa is the backup big. Stallings gets some time. What I would say with Westminster College is this team is really good on offense, right? You see they shoot almost 50% from the field, with a 56% effective field goal percentage and over 1 point per possession, which is outstanding as a team. You'll see Irwin and Parody are the top scorers with Woodard in third. And so Irwin is the 6'3" point guard and Parody is a small forward, but he's just 6 feet. Oops, this is the wrong team. Um, you'll see they're super fast though, 18 and 16, and they can both shoot really well. They're both solid handlers and good IQs, so they're nice and good on offense. What I would worry about with this team, and this is a bot team, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. They're not great at defense. You look at their defensive ratings, only one guy at 10 perimeter defense or higher, and it's just a 10, and he doesn't start, I don't believe. He gets 18 minutes a game. Eh.
yeah.
And then Woodard with 11 interior defense, and that's about it. And then rebounding, no one in double digits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So real quick, if you don't mind,
Mm-hmm.
you highlighted Woodard's the only one that's in double digits for interior defense. He's still
Mm-hmm.
giving up 50% from the field on the season to opponent field goal percentage. Um, so even their best interior defender is struggling. So I think
Yeah.
it's pretty fair to say that defense might be their downfall here.
Yeah, right. And then they're pretty small in the wings, right? The 6 foot small forward in parity in the 5'11 shooting guard and Moss. And again, they're fast, so it helps. But with sevens and perimeter defense, they're gonna get pushed around and bullied, I'd say. Um, and they're not super deep. Their staminas aren't that great, so I think you can run on them and just gas them out, and that's how you beat them. I wouldn't be too scared if I came up against them in the tournament, to be honest.
You would kind of hope that you come up against them in the tournament.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And do you want to talk about this next team or should I?
Yeah, sure. I can talk about Albany.
All right. Yeah.
So this is Decoy Dan's team. Decoy Dan 47. Good name. Good name. And so they're currently sitting at number 42 in RPI. The tourney projection has them as an 8 seed. They are a team that has a lot of size, right? Oh, sorry, I'm going a little bit too fast for you here. Um,
It's all good.
yes, yeah. So Albany currently sitting as an 8 seed, which isn't bad,
Okay.
isn't terrible, But one of the things that we want to highlight with this team, if you go to the depth chart real quick, is like size, particularly
Mm-hmm.
size in the front court, right? So you look at Edge and
Wow.
Kallenberg, 6'10 and 6'10, and then they have somebody coming off the bench that backs up both those guys that is also 6'10, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty nice to have. That's pretty wild. Um, and I mean, you look at these players, and SI wise, they're starting power forward as Seymour Edge, right? Great name. Seymour Edge all the
Yeah.
way down there at a 120 SI as a junior, a 1 star, right? And his SI distribution is not great. Like the one thing that he's good at is rebounding. He has a 17 rating in rebounding and a 10 rating
Mm-hmm.
interior defense, but he's not like a superstar by any means. But yet he's still getting it done, averaging almost a double double. And then Kallenberg, their other center, that's 6'10, the 6'10 guy we talked about, 125 SI. He's a little bit more of an inside shooter. He's got a rating of 15 on inside shot, um, and 11 or 12 in rebounding, 11 interior defense. So I mean, some pretty like some pretty usable big guys in there, I would say. It's just nice to have that depth and size overall, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And the guy as the backup, Royce Brown, he's not the best on defense, not the best on offense, but he's big and sometimes that's just all you need, right?
Yeah, I mean, like we said, a lot of teams are hurting for size. Historically, it's great if you get two 6'10 guys. I mean, a lot of teams want one 6'10 guy, especially when we're talking about LL5.
Yeah.
If you get two 6'10 guys, it's great. If you have three to rotate, then that's sort of a luxury for LL5, I would
Right.
say.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean,
Sure.
interestingly enough, Sal Glick is their highest SI guy, sitting at 153, but
Mm-hmm.
he's not their lead scorer. That's Dodge, the point guard, Jason Dodge, who's currently hitting at 14.4 points a game, but only 1.4 assists. Oh, it looks like they're actually okay. Yeah, so they're starting Glick at point guard. That makes sense because I was
Mm.
looking at the assist numbers. I was like, huh, wait a second. They're starting
Yeah.
Glick at point guard. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, looking at the ratings.
yeah,
Um, but it looks like Dodge is like a backup point guard too, so
yeah. So
they let him go there too sometimes.
yeah, so it looks like they're sort of juggling positions because Sal Glick is a net by nature at shooting guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're sort of having position flexibility and using it to their advantage. It seems like,
Yeah, right.
yeah. So, but I mean, otherwise, like we look at this team and it's kind of confusing. It's not a team that you would expect to be dominating, and yet they are. So I don't know. We'll see if they keep it up. We'll see if they have any tourney success.
Yeah.
Forward. Yeah.
All right, and you see the next team we're going to talk about. That's going to be Humboldt State Gibbs Stars team. I always want to add a few R's, and give me like Gibbs Star. What's his name? But yeah, I'll talk about them real briefly. And with Humboldt, they're number 30 in RPI, but they're projected 8 seed. So again, another case of a team uh, seated below where the RPI would indicate. With Humble, their calling card is defense. They're really solid defensively. Look at those perimeter defensive ratings for their top four guys who all start. And then, their interior defense is pretty solid. Obviously, Ledbetter is the anchor here. And Michaels is interesting because he's actually the starting shooting guard, but then will move to power forward. So he's able to defend both. He's fast enough to play at shooting guard. He's big enough to play at power forward. Yeah, his rebounding is not great, so it's actually like really bad. um, but he's able to hold his own. I'd say otherwise, other than that, strength is solid. His handling is fine. He can drive. He can finish. He can shoot. So I like the use of Tyler Michaels there really. Um, but they're not super deep, and while they pounded inside, you can see Ledbetter and Michaels and even PJ Worth is pretty good scoring the ball. And then Brad Lawson, though, is their top scorer, I believe, with his interior play, right? He's
Yeah, that's correct.
16 in IS. Cool. And yeah, he's pretty big. So they rely on pounding the ball inside on offense and just playing solid defense, which, that's probably how I like to play. But I don't know if it's super sustainable come tournament time when you got these teams pressing your ass off, 80% of the time, and shooting threes like 40% of the possessions or 50% of the possessions. So, not saying it's clearly working for Humboldt. It's worked for me before. Um, but it can, when you're one style, it makes you more predictable and more easy to plan for. And so that's not always the greatest thing. The other thing I want to talk about is they're not outstanding height or size wise. Yeah, they've got a 6'9" and a 6'8" guy, which are fine. And they have a 7-foot backup, but the weights on Ledbetter, he's 255. Actually, that's pretty good. What am I talking about? What do I know? But a form strength. So it's maybe that weight is a bunch of fat. He's a little chubby. But I remember almost recruiting him. He was a pretty interesting guy. Brad Lawson, though, he's only 225 pounds, which, is fine, but, but more is nice, definitely. And then their shooting numbers are kind of lackluster, right? 13 is their highest outside shooting mark, and then 13 in range for a couple guys. But one of them is your big man, who also has a 4 in outside shooting. So it's not, yeah, I wouldn't say they can outshoot any team, basically. Um, and speed wise, they're not great. So really, this is a team that should want to slow it down, pound inside, and zone it up maybe. But yeah, they have a very it seems like they're one dimensional to me. In that one dimension is working okay, but yeah, it's maybe easy to game plan for. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, when it comes to tourney time and you have to beat teams that are really good across the board, just something to keep an eye on. Yeah.
Right. All right. Let's move on to our next team here.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the last thing we talk about in D2.
Yeah.
The Barry Buccaneers from Miami Shores, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
What a fantastic school name.
Yeah.
So President Carter Neal. So, surprisingly, Barry's in the same conference as Humboldt State is, right? V6.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but dude, V6 is loaded.
V6
right?
is
V6
loaded.
has a lot of really good teams.
We've talked about them a bunch, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really good teams here. Eckerd, Barry, Humboldt. I mean, if you look, Chattanooga's in 10th, and they're at 8-7 in conference.
Yeah, so, wow.
You don't usually see, and that's the only team that's not sitting in relegation right now that has a negative point differential.
Mm-hmm.
You don't usually see that kind of thing, right? Especially, and then the number 10 team in the conference sitting at a 538 RPI. So this is a pretty competitive conference, and I would know because I'm sitting right there at 5 with Oswego on a 2L streak, but we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, you don't usually see a team with a winning record with a negative point differential.
It means they're like winning close games and getting blown out in the bad games, probably. Um,
Right, yeah.
yeah. So, but either way, I think it's just a really loaded conference. But again, highlighting teams that have relatively low SIs are outplaying their SI performances. Right. This is a team that's sitting at a 123.3 TPI. They're currently projected to be a 9 seed in the tourney. Those are 123.3 TPI. I mean, sure, we're talking about LL5, but again, we're talking about some teams that are really loaded in LL5. And, talking about a conference is really good. But interesting depth chart, right? You're looking at right now. So Quincy Holland is their small forward. He's sitting at 5'11". That's generally undersized for what you want to see at small forward.
Yeah.
And their point guard sitting at 6'5.5". That's generally oversized for what you'd see for a point guard. So some interesting decisions there.
I would think they would switch, right? Wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you would think, right?
Just based on the heights.
Just based on the heights alone. But then when you look at a limited roster like this, right? So again, outperforming their TPI, you only have one person that has a pass rating over in double digits, right? At 14, and that is Seymour. Right. And so even though he's big in size and you probably want to get that size, to match up in terms of small forward, you don't really have a choice. Right. The second best rating in terms of passing is 8. And
Oh, wow.
and one of those guys is a power forward. So so you're going to be struggling in that case. So I think their position breakdown sort of makes sense, even though it's peculiar.
For sure.
But yeah, so and they have some good size on the inside, 6'8.5" power forward, 6'10" center, and Rich Christ, who's been having a pretty decent season. But I mean, he's a pretty strong defensive player. As you can see, he's got an interior defense rating of 15, does Rich Christ. But then if you're going to play Christ at center and then you're going to play Mitch Gordon at power forward, and his interior defense rating is 5.
Yikes.
That's an interesting dichotomy there, right? Maybe you're switching your center and power forward in terms of matchups, right? So the other team has a really good center, you're going to play your strong defensive center there, or maybe you switch it back and forth. But that's just not really an ideal drop off in terms of overall team defense there, especially when you have Bynum sitting there with an interior defensive rating of 14.
Yeah,
he's currently backing up both those guys, but you would think that guy might want to get some play in terms of defensive matchups. So
yeah, that's what the thing that struck me first too, I think. But you look at the staminas and it kind of makes a little more sense, at least.
Yeah.
Right. That Bynum is back up with that 5 stamina, but yeah, totally. You're hoping Gordon is only matching up with stretch 4s basically,
and
which isn't the case.
Looking at the stats, right? So Gordon plays 26 minutes a game. Bynum's currently sitting at 30 minutes a game. And it looks like they've split the starts appropriately. But Gordon, again, sitting at 26 minutes a game, getting 13 starts. It feels like it's a matchup dependent kind of thing. But he's giving up 53% from the field. He's obviously getting bullied.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And, he's grabbing 8.2 boards a game. That's kind of good. But, I mean, 53% from the field. That's not the greatest. But then again, you look at Bynum and his plus minus is minus 2.1 on the season. So, I mean, this is the problem with having limited teams in pretty decent conferences and stuff. You have to get the best out of what you have. And I think it's pretty fair to say that they're doing that.
Yeah. Barry's having a good year, it looks like, for sure.
Yeah. I can't wait to knock them off their high horse. Hopefully.
Well, they are run by a human, but he hasn't logged in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. He registered for the team and then dipped on the team same day.
Oh, poor Barry. Poor Barry.
Poor Barry Buccaneers. Mismanagement. What can you do?
All right, let's go to, speaking of mismanagement, let's go to D3.
Let's go.
I don't know why that's a transition, but,
It's a natural transition. Right?
I think it makes sense with the first team we're going to look at, though.
If there's ever a division that's going to be the poster boy for mismanagement, it's going to be D3. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the first team we're going to talk about, though, is a return to Davidson
Wildcats.
And Boating. And Zach Lowe is the feature player on the page. That always gets me. But speaking of mismanagement, Boateng, he hasn't logged in since registering either on January 6th. So, Davidson's having a really good year. They are humming along at 23-2. We talked about them before.
Yeah.
But they're currently a 2 seed in the tournament projections. So, I don't know. That's pretty confusing, isn't it?
So they're a 2 seed, but then get this. If we look at the rankings, they're the number one overall team in D3 with the strongest RPI at
Right.
0.598. There's only two teams above 0.59 in D3. They're at 598, and yet
Mhm.
they're still sitting as a 2 seed. I would be really confused if that was the case. Now,
Yeah.
a reason for that might be if you look in the top six, there's three teams from that conference in the top six of RPI,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so Davidson, and then Northeastern State, and Purdue University Fort Wayne.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a really strong conference. And right now, Davidson's sitting in second on point differential alone. And so that just might be, those two teams are going to battle, and whichever one wins the conference will probably get the 1 seed if they stay
Right.
in path.
I think that's a case that we talked about where like conference standing makes a difference. And yeah, they're tied, but they are second, so that's what knocks them down from a 1 to a 2, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but I mean, if I was the number one RPI team in a division with a sizable difference, I'm expecting to be a 1 seed. But I mean, it is what
Yeah.
it is. It is what it
Right.
is. Yeah.
All right. So I pulled up the next team we're gonna talk about, and it's another return team. It's the Wyoming Cowboys out of Laramie. And we got some news here, don't we?
Oh, we do, because we always love when people comment, and especially when they're going to make a guarantee.
Ooh, yeah. What a
A
guarantee.
guarantee.
A
I mean,
guarantee.
when you put yourself out there and you're making a guarantee, you could look like a fool because we're obviously going to be calling you out if it goes poorly.
Yeah.
Um, but we hyped up Washington State a little bit, the Cougars, and Wyoming got pissed. Wyoming and Coach Dirk Seaman did not want to hear about Washington State, and so President Wyoming promised a win against those frauds, Washington State, in Pullman. In Pullman.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened? They pulled it out.
Oh, look at that.
A 95 to 71 W by Wyoming in Pullman, to knock those frauds off of their high horse. So,
Yeah, wow.
I mean, we love guarantees. We love when you actually pull out that guarantee, although it probably would have been more fun to pick on you. But hey, you did your thing. So,
Yeah, a huge 24-point win on the road, right? Dennis Rice had a hell of a game.
yeah,
Dang.
yeah,
Nice. Congrats, Wyoming. Way to
yeah.
live up to the guarantee there,
Please comment on our videos more and make guarantees. It's so much fun.
huh? Yeah, that's
Like, if
awesome.
you want to guarantee you win the rest of your season, just please do it, please.
Yeah, and overall, besides that win, Wyoming is playing pretty well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wyoming's playing pretty well. They're on a nice streak. Like we said, they're number one in their conference. So, you know,
Mm-hmm.
probably going to finish the season as like a 2 or 3 seed and for tourney. So, pretty
All
solid team.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and where are we going next?
So let's talk about the Stephen F. Austin Lumberjacks from Nacogdoches, Texas, with President LeBron James.
You mean LeBron James?
LeBron James. LeBron James.
Had to have that in there.
We had to. It's mandatory. So if you look at the conference standings for this team,
Okay.
yeah. So they're currently 12-3 atop their conference, but only with a 15-10 record. So obviously this is not a great conference if you look at some of these teams and their overall records. Not super strong. But again, we're talking about D3 being one of those things where you might have teams that sit atop their conference that aren't really like strong seeded in the tourney because there's so much variation there. And they're currently sitting as an 11 seed in the tourney projection.
Ooh,
Yeah. Yeah. So
well, they're in, and sometimes that's all that's needed.
exactly. And maybe they make a good run in the conference tourney, and maybe some teams around them get knocked down. But yeah, sitting all the way down there,
Where I can't even see them. What
middle column.
Oh, here they are.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
And I mean, it makes sense. They're 15-10. They're the only team with double-digit losses currently sitting in the tourney in D3. And a lot of teams, almost, or actually every team that's on the bubble has single-digit losses. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, they're punching above their weight right now. Their conference performance is obviously buoying them there. So,
For sure, for sure.
yeah,
Well, I don't know. Just keep it up, LeBron James.
keep it up, LeBron James.
All right, where are we going next?
Let's go to George Washington quickly.
All right.
George Washington. Why did I just do that?
Wow, John, the president's been playing there for a long time.
John Burney.
Yeah, wow. That's cool to see.
Yeah, it is cool to see. But John,
All right, so George Washington, they're currently 21-4, and they're sitting in first place of their conference, which, we love to see. At 14-1 in conference, that is as hot as it gets, really, right?
you're dominating your competition.
Yeah. But, we've been bringing up this tournament seating. They're on the third line on the bubble. They're only on the bubble despite leading their conference.
21-4, leading their conference, and they're on the bubble. Not even the first team or first line on the bubble. I mean, third line
Yeah.
on the bubble. They're one loss away from being out.
They're one loss away from being out. That's wow. So, this conference, that means they're probably not very strong, and you can kind of see that because a promoting team has an RPI under four, has an RPI of 450, and everyone else in the conference below that is under 500. So,
Not
yeah, that's a pretty weak conference.
not to mention that team has an overall record that's 12-13.
Wow. Yeah.
And a negative point differential in the season.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, okay, I could see why they're on the bubble only, beating up on this weak conference. But you still gotta hand it to them. They're beating the teams in front of them.
You got to do. You can only play the schedule that's put in front of you, like we said.
Yeah. So just hope you don't lose in the conference tournament, I guess.
Yeah. This is a situation where if you lose in the conference tourney, you're just not making it. You're not going to get down
Right.
much,
Oh,
probably.
that's high pressure though, man. I don't like
It
that
is.
feeling.
My Kingsville Javelinas are sitting in the same position, so we would know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But we'll see that things could change. There's still, 15 games to play, and plus the conference tournament games. So, you got to wonder how President Bernie is feeling. But right now it looks like he's pretty solid within the conference. But you got to finish the job too.
I mean, that conference is so bad that he should win the conference tourney. Let's be real, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just get his at large, or his automatic. I mean, get his automatic bid. I don't think that should.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
don't know. Watch out for Alabama State here. Dangerous looking.
Hey, we've seen much worse in terms of point differential in conference.
Oh man, have we?
We have
Have
seen
we ever?
much worse. So to round out D3, let's revisit one of the bot teams of the week, the Fairleigh Dickinson Florham Devils.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I remember you've talked about them a couple weeks ago.
I did, and I highlighted that this is a team that somebody should take over because they are performing well. And what do you
Right,
know?
no kidding.
In the top 50, they are the lowest total RPI, or TPI, I should say. And yet, what are they sitting at?
16th.
16th.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
And tied for the lead in their conference with two other teams, granted.
Yeah.
But solid overall. 19-6 overall record. 11-4 in conference.
567 RPI. That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I will take a bow on this one.
Yeah, yeah. Good call, right?
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But always good to follow up on our bot team of the weeks.
For sure. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, but we wanted to hit a big change, I think, at least, in the game. So we're not going to do bot teams of the week or tanking teams of the week. Instead, we're going to talk about this change in fatigue. And it's been, this like big question about how much of an effect it has and stuff. But, the admin has changed the code, it seems like. so that there are actual injuries associated with um,
Fatigue.
sorry, I picked the wrong team. With fatigue, yeah. I just typed in the wrong team. That's why I was. I just played this team, UNC Greensboro. Good game. I'm gonna mess up the name. So good game, Nazgay. Um, but when you look at this roster, we just played them in an OT game. It was close, but they got decimated by injuries. And Dan Doherty, actually, you look at the injury, it's fatigue, and he's out for 4 days now. And so that's an injury, yeah, because he played too much lately, I guess. His minutes were too high.
Can you go to his
So
game
I
log
don't
real
know.
quick?
Yeah, yeah.
Just out of
So I think
curiosity.
that's really interesting. I believe it's like light, and moderate for the past 3 games.
Huh.
Because
Okay.
I looked at that previously too.
Interesting.
So I would say be on the lookout. If you're a team, if you're a president playing your guys, 35 plus minutes a game, I'd be careful now.
Yeah. We're talking about you, MSU Moorhead. I mean,
I mean, I believe the admin posted that like the rate of the injuries hasn't changed, but I'm not sure. We'll see. We gotta see because it definitely seems interesting that there's now injuries associated with fatigue more so.
I mean, yeah, and something that has been brought up a lot in the Discord and stuff is, well, how much does fatigue factor into end of game performance or on court performance as a player's more fatigued or less fatigued? And I think Steve
Totally, yeah.
posted about that at one point, didn't he?
Yeah, he was involved in the conversation last week, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the main takeaway from that conversation was?
I think it's just the changes that have been implemented with the injury, and maybe some in-game text, although I haven't found any in-game text related to fatigue yet.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my arm disappears. Um, and but but I think there's talk about changing like the penalty, the drop in performance on court if they're more fatigued. So I don't think those changes have been implemented yet. I think we can both speak to that right now. Um, but I wouldn't be surprised if they come next season.
I mean, they make logical sense, right? If you're running your guys up and down the floor 35, 36 minutes a game in a fast-paced offense, their performance is going to drop. It should, at
It
least.
should, yeah.
It should
Right.
probably manifest in one of two ways, right? Maybe they struggle on defense. Maybe they can't get their shot off any that much better anymore. Or maybe they just foul like crazy because
Mm-hmm.
now, they're super fatigued. It doesn't matter what their speed is. They can't keep up with their, who they're defending. Maybe they have to foul like crazy. Um,
I think it should be all three, really.
yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
Everything. Yeah.
And
But
that
yeah, I think that's interesting
that would
to
just reward
potentially see.
yeah, that would just reward teams that are deep, right? The teams that find guys coming off the bench that are going to contribute.
Hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So I don't know. Just keep your eye out on that and any changes that might happen. We're looking forward to just seeing this game continue to improve, though, right?
Yeah. And just one last comment about the fatigue. It'll be really interesting to see, maybe somebody's making like a deep run in the conference tournament, outperforming a little bit and playing their guys maybe a few too many minutes, and then they can pick up a key injury heading into like the national tournament.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, that'll be something to keep our eyes on, and we'll have to highlight one of those situations if we come upon it.
For sure. Yeah. We'll both keep our eyes out for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to. That's the point of recruiting better and smarter, though. To get a deeper team, and not that that's the only strategy, clearly, but it's just uh, it's I don't know what to say, how to say it. It's just something to consider when you are recruiting and in game planning, I think. Um, like I said, it's not the only way to be successful, but it's something you have to consider.
And it might be something that people want to prioritize moving forward, and maybe people recruit differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that about does it for us, huh?
Yeah, I think we should wrap it up. well over an hour at this point.
Yeah. Sorry about talking about some teams too long. Y'all love it, I know.
I'm sure those presidents don't mind.
Yeah.
Let's be realistic. Yeah.
All right.
Um,
So we'll try to be back on, in the middle of the week this week. Sorry we didn't put out episode this past week. We got some things going on, but
yeah.
we'll be
Busy
back. Don't worry.
lives. Yeah.
For sure.
We'll try to see if we can't get another guest on the show pretty soon. Seems like a
Yeah.
lot of people
Yeah.
really like the Bridger interview, so we'll have to expand that down.
We'll have to put the call out to some people have expressed interest, but haven't locked anything down yet.
Yep. So look out for us reaching out to you and seeing if you guys want to jump on for an interview at some point.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, Rob, I'll talk to you later.
All right, idiot number 1 signing off.
Idiot number 2 signing off.
See you guys later.